Thank you so much for all of you coming tonight. It's a real pleasure to be talking here with all these wonderful guests. So I hate to be the one to break it, but climate change is here. We are living it now, and unfortunately, this is just the start. I personally have been concerned about climate change for a couple of decades and became more concerned with the birth of my first son, because I felt worried that the world we were creating for him was not the same world that I had enjoyed, the same beautiful, prosperous, and safe world. And I'm not the only one feeling this way. Recent polling and the data from our Voices focus groups show that climate change is the #1 issue of concern for the people of Mackellar. I believe for a long while, as many of us did, that our political leaders, the people representing us, would act in our best interests to address climate change. However, that has not been the story of the federal government over the last decade. A few years ago, I was chatting to my then 12-year-old son and his friends. They were asking me about climate change. I said to them, unfortunately, it's going to be an issue that you kids will need to deal with. And this beautiful 12-year-old boy turned around to me with a big smile of eagerness on his face and said, "Yes, because you adults have failed us." So that was the wake-up call. I'd been waiting and I realised it was time to stop waiting and to step up. Little did I know, and in fact I never imagined for a minute, that it would look like this. Many of you also know my story, perhaps, about how I met our local member. At the end of the Black Summer bushfires, when smoke was still thick in the air, I asked him to please speak up on behalf of Mackellar, because there were so many of us that were distressed about the fires and about climate change. And the answer that I heard was, well, the problem is you can't mention the words climate change in the party room because the Queensland MPs jump up and down, and I knew it was time to get involved. I stepped up as I realised our local member did not have the power, the freedom, or the ability to genuinely represent us, the people of Mackellar. Over the past decade, we've seen that our federal government has not only refused to act meaningfully on climate change, but they have repealed and undermined the bodies and policies that would have allowed us to make important transitions and carbon reductions. The current government has also actively campaigned against the rest of the world taking action on climate change, arguing in international forums for reduced targets and weakened international pledges on action and goals. We've had a steady stream of misinformation for decades in support of inaction on climate. First of all, climate change did not exist. Then it did exist, but it wasn't man-made. Then it did exist and it was man-made, but the increasing CO2 levels were actually good for growing food. Climate change does exist, but Australia's contribution is too small to make a difference. Australia is actually a world leader on climate change, and we are meeting and beating our really great 2030 carbon targets. All misinformation. The trillion-dollar question is why? Why, when the science and expert opinion on climate change is irrefutable and has been for a long while now? The IPCC has said that if we want a livable future, we must not open any new coal or gas mines, yet our government continues to approve them and push for more. The UN Secretary General has said the addiction to fossil fuels is mutually assured destruction. The WHO has said that climate change is the greatest threat to human health. Former Australian defence chiefs have come together to warn us that climate change is the biggest security risk to Australia and a risk to our future. They have revealed how they were silenced and prohibited from speaking openly about climate change. They warn that we will be at the forefront of the impacts of climate change, and we currently have no plan to deal with it. Former emergency leaders, thank you, Greg. You were really a shining light for us during the Black Summer bushfires. As you heard and you know, Greg and his group of former emergency leaders tried to warn our government about the impending mega fires that we were at risk of, and they were ignored and dismissed, despite trying for 18 months, was it, Greg?
We're still
trying. Years. The Business Council of Australia, a conservative body representing over 100 of Australia's biggest corporations, also warns that unless we get ahead of the global transition away from fossil fuel dependency, then we will be left behind and it will be incredibly difficult to catch up. They warn that we will not be able to maintain our current standard of living if we do not urgently diversify our economy into the renewable, high-tech, clean energy sector. The Business Council of Australia also states that we've already missed out on billions of dollars in investment because we have been too slow to act and because of the uncertainty around policy and targets from our government. Just a couple of weeks ago in the budget, the government reduced funding to our key climate change and renewable energy agencies, which some of our panellists have worked on, including the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and ARENA, the Australian Renewable Energy Agency. Funding was reduced by 35% over the next 4 years. Probably the one thing that I find most difficult to comprehend is that just a few months ago, the Morrison government fought and won a federal court case against a group of teenagers and young people. They argued successfully that the government should not be held to have a duty of care to the children of Australia. And this is despite almost certain significant harms to their health caused by ongoing use and investment in fossil fuels. How can we accept that as our reality? All I can say is thank goodness for the people that are on the stage and the many thousands like them around Australia who are leading the way on renewables and on climate change. We know that Australia can be a world leader on climate change, and we can put ourselves in a position to be a clean energy superpower. We know the solutions exist, and we'll hear about them tonight, but what is missing is the political, not just the political will, but the political leadership. With all of this in mind, as the member for Mackellar, I will work towards tackling climate change and help Australia to become a renewable superpower. We're going to be releasing our full policy in a few days, but just now as a summary, I'll do that by legislating a minimum 50% emissions reduction target by 2030 in line with the Business Council of Australia and all the states. By stopping new coal, oil and gas developments. By establishing an independent climate change commission to advise and make recommendations to the government, similar to how the Reserve Bank of Australia works. By supporting Australia's electricity market regulator to deliver at least 80% renewable energy by 2030. The agency has identified that this is entirely doable. By making Australia a renewable energy superpower with a plan and policies that support an orderly and just transition to a net zero economy. By making electric vehicles and renewable energy accessible to everyday Australians. By developing long-term adaptation strategies to protect our infrastructure, supply chains and communities from the impacts of climate change. By providing federal funding to build the capacity to provide rapid and coordinated disaster relief for communities suffering extreme weather disasters. And by investing in Australia's natural capital by regenerating and replanting our nation's forests and countrysides. So there will be more published on the website soon, but now we'll get on with the panel discussion, which I'm sure will be very exciting. Thank you.